What do you do? What do you do in a time like this? Uh, Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout. My takes on all things considerable. I am the aforementioned Emil Amok, and this is the thing that's a real test. The invasion is Putin's test for the world, but it's really the test for, well, it's a test for everyone who believes in democracy and freedom. And, sometimes I try to, I'll say some things that might be kind of funny to bring a little levity, but this is all just serious now. Because we are talking about something that hasn't happened since 1939, which is a war in Europe. That's what happened when the German troops went into Poland and pretty much had their way. And now we see, I think the most shocking thing about the last 24 hours has been how easy it has been for Russian troops to just go in, take over Donbass. We're talking about Luhansk and the other region there in the Donbass area, and everyone was sort of speculating that, oh well, they're just going to go maybe a little further to the west where Ukrainian forces are like prepared. But no. Russia starts bombing all over the country. And their presence, ground troop wise, tank wise, about 20 miles away from the capital. So if you're looking at the map and you see all these little sparks where there are points of invasion, you begin to wonder, what are we into now? It's history, though. This is history, and you just have to shake your head. If you're a news person, you want to watch every bit, because this is history unfolding. We are here I'm 8,000 miles away. I'm on the West Coast. So, the people who are still reporting on the front lines, they've been reporting since about 10 o'clock last night. 10 o'clock Eastern time, 7 Pacific. They're still at it. And at some point, it's not slow. It's fast, but at some point it's got to slow down, right? And you think that maybe, okay, the U.S. will respond. NATO will respond. They said they'll respond. Of course, I'm a peace lover, so I'm saying, okay, sanctions. We like sanctions. Bring them on. And we had Joe Biden come on, and the sanctions that he announced this morning, not that great, real. Well, they're still important. A few more banks added to stop the flow of money to Russia, stop Russia's access to money. But I noticed one thing they didn't do, this SWIFT mechanism, which is like a message system that apparently some of the allies did not want that cut off because they're doing business with Russia. So it's the press conference that followed Joe Biden's speech was really strange because he was pressed on the issue. Is this enough? Is there going to be more? And apparently there are more things, although Biden stopped short of going after Putin himself personally. because he's known about this. This is the cost of being an autocrat. This is the cost of being a bad guy. He knows this was going to happen. So when you're sitting on 600 something $billion, I mean, where's the pain point? And so until there's that pain point, we'll just keep rolling on. And then we see the consequences of Ukraine being kind of nonchalant at the beginning, not wanting to show fear, but not really preparing in the way that they could have. People were talking about, well, they should have put out landmines and all these things. Well, now the Russians are like on the freeway, the invasion freeway, it seems, coming in from not just from Donbass, but also from Belarus. There's apparently a road that is just like a 2-lane road. And so I'm just shocked by the speed at which the Russians have been able to just dot the country or pepper the country with airstrikes, get their troops in place, and as military strategists have said, well, they're just preparing the ground. And then the second stage would be that the actual troops come in. And then it'll be a matter of what kind of fight do the Ukrainians pose, or what can they come up with when the troops are on the ground, when the boots are on the ground, their boots versus the Russian boots, and where are NATO's boots? So it's fascinating because this is all history in real time. And the big question for a lot of people is, okay, that's 8,000 miles over there, Emil. Do I care? And I think you have to care. You have to care if you have any love for freedom, for democracy. You got to care, which is really strange because the former president of the United States is actually praising Putin, saying, well, he's doing things strategically. He's a master. This is no time to praise Putin. Not for this act. This is no time to praise Putin. And yet, look at the mixed messages to Americans from top Republicans and from U.S. propaganda. I mean, Fox News. There's Tucker Carlson saying, oh, wow, Putin, wow. No, this is not the time to praise Putin. But former Secretary of State Pompeo, former President Trump, wow, they're praising Putin. And all of their sound bites are going to Russia, which selectively shows what Americans think. And then they're the Russians thinking, well, I guess the Americans are for this. You see how it's important to have a free flow of information, how to have transparency. They don't get to see Joe Biden's speech. They don't get to see what's really going on. They only get to see what Putin says. And what Putin says is ridiculous on its face. I mean, if you saw, New York Times did they showed a transcript of what Putin was saying to Russia and what he was using to justify this invasion. And the idea that, well, Ukraine, they split off and they pose a threat to all these Russian speakers and Russian loyalists who are in Ukraine because they want to essentially perform an act of genocide against them, which is outrageous, not true. And in the speech, Putin actually talks about Russophobia. Ukraine has Russophobia. They're going after any Russians. They're going after Russians, and the line in Putin's speech in the translation was, "It is not surprising that Ukrainian society was faced with the rise of far-right nationalism, which rapidly developed into aggressive Russophobia and neo-Nazism." The neo-Nazis of Ukraine? We know who the neo-Nazi is. And it's the neo-Nazi who's the head of Russia. This is outrageous. This is why, I mean, and this is the justification for war. If what I just read to you doesn't get your ire, get your dander up, well, like I said, are you a freedom-loving American? I mean, that really is the issue. Are you a freedom-loving, democracy-loving American? No matter what party. Just, do you love freedom? Do you love the fact that you can walk outside and yell out in the streets and gather, peacefully assemble, have a right of First Amendment, have a right of Second Amendment, that you have all the freedom that democracy affords? If you value that, then you will go deep inside and find the Ukrainian in you. Because that's what's at stake. What's at stake is, there is Putin bombing, moving his troops into a sovereign nation that was doing nothing that Putin is accusing them of, but it's being used as justification for the bombs and for the military force rolling into this sovereign nation and then taking over these regions within a free Ukraine. And I'm talking about the Luhansk and, in the Donbass region, Donetsk and Luhansk. He just took them over. These are ours. No, they're not. They belong to the free nation of Ukraine. And now, if that's all he did, you might say, well, okay, Emil, I don't really care. He's not stopping there. He's going and taking over not just the western part of Donbass, but he's begun peppering his aerial strikes all throughout Ukraine. And the clear goal is, we just want the whole thing. Putin just wants the whole thing, because I guess this is his hill to die on. He wants to assemble or reassemble the old Soviet Union. And that's his megalomaniacal fantasy on full display for the world. The free world needs to stand up and speak out for the Ukrainians. This is just monumental. It's just not done. And this is the sort of the thing that it takes a real, it's not just an egotist or a narcissist. Is it a sickness? Frankly, I blame Trump. I blame Trump because when Trump engaged with Putin back in 2016 or 2018, and they talked about the election. They had proof that Russia meddled in the 2016 election, and Trump just coddled Putin. And we knew then, or Putin knew then, that he could get away with a lot. So he's been testing all the while. Here's 4 years later, he's done it. And the best we could do are sanctions, because it's the challenge. How do you defend freedom with a minimum of bloodshed, with a respect for peace? How do you do that? How do you do that if you are a pacifist? How do you do that if you do not believe in war? How do you make a strong man autocrat respect the rule of law or respect the right of a sovereign nation? I don't think you can. And that's what is stumping, I think, everyone who's looking at this, everyone who is trying to figure out what's next, what Putin's going to do next, what the United States and the allies should do next, because one by one, last night, before or just as the invasion started, you saw the inadequacy of the UN, the Peacekeeping Council, the Security Council. What could they do? Nothing. The United States, middle of the night, what could they do? Nothing. NATO, what could they do? Nothing. Meanwhile, Putin just goes off and hurls his bombs and moves his military into position, and he may not have enough military forces to cover all of Ukraine. Ukraine is about the size of Texas. Do that with 150,000 people, 190,000 military force. I mean, you're dealing with essentially a population, 40 million, and they're patriots. They're willing to fight. So that's one thing that's positive. But when will this happen? I guess we're going to start seeing this. President Biden laid out the sanctions, as I said this morning, and the sanctions were a little tougher than the ones he added more banks, made it more difficult for Russians to buy technology, made it more difficult for Russian exchange with the West. Didn't go after Putin himself, but did go after some oligarchs. But the question is it enough? And if it's not enough, so what do we do then? So this is the conundrum for everyone who wants some kind of peaceful solution, some diplomatic. There is no diplomatic solution. You don't talk to a madman. You don't talk to someone who doesn't want to talk and who sees what you're offering as insignificant. So I just want to play a little bit about from Biden's speech, because Biden, when Biden speaks, when anyone speaks representing the U.S. and talks to the nation, he really has to sell why this is important. And so it's not about sanctions. It's not about we're going to bomb the heck back, or, I mean, you could say that, but he wants to be measured. It needs to be a measured response. What he really needs to do is paint the picture so that we all care. So here's what Biden said this morning. Oh, I gotta plug in my thing first. Okay, here we go. Here's this is what Biden said this morning.
This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world.
Okay, so Europe and around the world. Okay, he's got our interest. We should care, right?
Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about a genuine security concerns on their part. It was always about naked aggression, about Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors through coercion and corruption, by changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause.
I mean, that's really the big issue. This is a war without a cause. You saw when I read the little bits of Putin's speech, he said that Ukraine had developed this aggressive Russophobia, and they were going after Russian separatists who were in Ukraine and practically committing genocide against these Russian peoples in Ukraine, and then saying it was neo-Nazism, this fascist, nationalistic Ukrainian thing, which it's not. It's not. And people in Ukraine are like, they're like seeking shelter in subway stations, saying, we don't need Putin. We're peaceful people. We don't want Russia here. But Putin has caused chaos. And so far, he really is unchecked. If the best the West can do is hear sanctions, it's gone unchecked. So here more of Biden. This is toward the tail end of his speech, which you would rarely hear. You'll probably hear people quote from the sanctions bit. But the tail end of his speech this morning really, he talks about naked aggression of Putin, talks about how, it's a war without a cause. People need to hear that so they know we are witnessing a crime, a global crime.
Putin's action betrays sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically.
I mean, that's what we hope. But, he's got to toss that in about here are the allies. We're doing this together with our allies in NATO. But, if you're hearing this as an American, you're saying, okay, now what are we doing to stop them? He says it's going to hurt Russia economically and strategically.
We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage.
Isn't Putin already a pariah on the international stage? He's going to be pariah plus. I just think that here's the thing. In questions after the speech, Biden insisted that these were tremendous sanctions. These were huge sanctions. They will have an impact. He says we have to wait and see. Maybe a month. A month. And I'm looking at people in the subway system, in all throughout. Well, in one particular town in Ukraine, where CNN was, and I'm thinking, people are scared. People are heading for the. There are some people who say, "I'm going to die with my country," but there are some who are saying, "I got to get to Poland. I got to get somewhere. I got to get on a train somewhere, and just leave while NATO figures out how to respond to this." Because I mean, if you, I mean, this is kind of an important exercise. If you were there, if you were Ukrainian and there, would you want to fight? Or if you had young children, would you want to take them to safety? So this is significant. I don't know what I do if I were younger. I probably want to stay and fight, but I, as a pacifist, I want to hope that they keep channels open. Those channels are closed now, but channels of talk open so that we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. I don't know if that's possible now. Here's more of Biden.
Any nation that counters Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies.
Now, this is good rah-rah, but I don't know if it's really connecting with people here in this country who believe in freedom and believe in democracy. Because I think that if you are an Asian American, for example, I say this because my mother was in the Philippines during the Japanese occupation of World War II. Because you know that. I mean, as soon as the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, they bombed Manila, and then they occupied the Philippines, and they were there. And it was terrible for the country. But if you were a young woman, a lot of the young women were they were brought into they were made into comfort women. They were brought in to serve the Japanese military. My mother was a young girl then, and she would tell me about hiding at the dress shop where she worked, trying not to be found by the Japanese military. And there are a number of interviews that you heard today, maybe from military folks. They say, yeah, the next thing is occupation. Russia occupies Ukraine. Certainly, maybe in the Donbass, but the way they are bombing the entire country, it looks like it won't just be the Donbass region. It might be Kiev. Already they're talking about trying to find President Zelensky, and maybe he's the target to imprison Zelensky and his cabinet, his government, use him as examples. But more than one military type has said you'd have to be worried about whether or not Zelensky has an exit route, a way to escape that, and so he could govern in exile, which is not uncommon. But so far, we don't know. So, I mean, the tough talk is there now. Now we're calling Putin tyrant. We're calling him a dictator. We're calling it naked aggression, a war without a cause. That's good. people are mentioning 1939 in Poland, which without directly calling Putin the neo-Hitler. But he is the strong man of the hour, the strong man of the moment. So I'm just going over Biden's speech again. And this is the final point, and usually the final point of the speech is the rallying call, right? The call to action. And he's talking about the voices of the people who yearn for freedom and democracy, right? And he says they cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies.
From people's hearts. They cannot be erased from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation.
Say, Biden kind of stumbles there a little bit. I mean, this is where he had to hammer it home.
They endure in the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation.
See, now that's really spelling it out for people. The people of Ukraine are enduring a contest between democracy and autocracy. That cannot be said enough. It's democracy versus autocracy. I said it the other day. It's the autocracy club, the AC versus the DC, the democracy club. And we got to be the democracy club. Between sovereignty and subjugation. These are the forces fighting it out in Ukraine. You got to pick a side. Which side are you on?
Make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine. May God protect our troops.
And that, Biden spoke this morning. He had a chance to sell it, but I think he kind of stumbled on a few words and he kind of garbled some things. But basically, that's what he's doing. What he's doing is he's got to set up this, hey, it's democracy versus autocracy. It's sovereignty versus subjugation. And freedom will prevail. And if you don't agree with me, where's your freedom-loving Americanness? You've got to find the Ukrainian in you. That's what's going to get people excited. And yet, I don't know. Are you excited about this? Because I know as a news person, I'm excited by it. I'm excited when I see, tanks and I see, oh my God, I'm watching every bit of it and all the different news channels. And then I think, wow, I am so privileged versus people in Russia or people in China who only are able to see selected things and not the full truth. Which just that thought should make you, or should get you riled up to think, we got to do something about the Ukrainians. Because if this is allowed to stand, and I hope these sanctions do work. They're going to take some time, but I hope the sanctions do work. But do we have a month? Before we lose interest here in America. I mean, that's kind of what I'm worried about. That people are slowly kind of discovering it. And until maybe, I mean, we've sent troops. We're sending more troops there today. Biden said there's going to be more troops, but not to Ukraine, but to the neighboring ally countries as backup, because he insisted that this is defensive. We're not going to engage. It's tough. It's tough for Biden because he's worried about the midterms. He's worried about how he appears politically. He's worried about all these other things that Vladimir Putin doesn't have to worry about. Vladimir Putin isn't worried about if anyone disagrees with him, not in Moscow. I mean, there are a handful of protests. All those people were arrested. So what we see now here in the West is so totally frustrating. We see the illogic of war. That just doesn't make sense. War without a cause. And the more it makes the U.S. look weak, the more Putin just marches in there saying, well, I could have told you, I'm prepared. I'm ready for this. Find the Ukrainian in you. You got to find the Ukrainian in you. That's what's at stake. It's all of democracy. Because this is just the first phase. And then you look at the world and you see, here's Putin, here's President Xi in China, and suddenly the U.S. is in the minority. Democracy, the free world, in the minority. That's a scary place in the 21st century. I mean, the New York Times today, I mean, you got to go to their website. The website is, has all the latest. But if you're a subscriber and you get the paper, Russian troops poised to invade, U.S. warns. Well, by the time I got the news, it was old. By the time I got the news, Russia was already in. But on the front page of the actual paper, bottom of the fold, but on the front page, Xi's China first policy is shutting out the world, closing flow of ideas that lifted a nation. And isn't this funny that we, after this very open kind of Winter Olympics, now we have these stories breaking that, here's the nut graph. The country's most dominant leader in decades, Xi Jinping, seems intent on redefining China's relationship with the world, recasting the meeting of minds and cultures as a zero-sum clash. Meaning, we're better than you. We don't need you if you're not Chinese. Closing the flow of ideas that lifted a nation. So we see China being autocratic with their wall, preventing things from going out and in. And then you see Russia, Zelensky, Ukraine's Zelensky said last night that the invasion was like Russia dropping a new Iron Curtain. You have two of the three superpowers controlling their people in the dark, and here's America, free, democracy, and do we look weak? I mean, this is why Trump said he wanted to be an autocracy like all the other guys, which is not good for democracy, which is not good for freedom. But it's good for strong men. And when the strong men dominate the world, then we're in trouble. That's why it's important for people to support Biden, because already Trump has his GOP saying things like, I mean, thank goodness for the Russian hawks like Lindsey Graham. There are other Russian hawks who say Putin should be condemned. You know, his action is naked aggression. I mean, that's normal, but we're not normal. We're now in a world where Fox News, their most watched anchor, is saying, yeah, Putin, not so bad over there. You got to find the inner Ukrainian in you. Find the inner Ukrainian in you. One last thing to mention before we go today. This was in the paper late yesterday. The Justice Department deciding to end the Trump policy on Chinese threats. We're talking about the Chinese initiative that went after scientists, went after researchers who were looked upon as spies. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the Olympic Games, that Christopher Wray was saying somewhat proudly, hey, China is a threat. We've got 2,000 cases. We're opening up 2 cases a day of Chinese stealing corporate secrets. It was part of that Trump-China initiative. Trump had all these anti-Asian things going on in his administration. This against, I mean, look, countries spy on each other, and that's to be expected. But what happens when you target a specific group, especially Asian, knowing that there are 23 million Asian Americans? Well, guess what? We get caught in the crosshairs. And there are a number of cases. I've mentioned Sherry Chen, who's been caught up in this, had her life wrecked. Now she's suing the U.S. government. There was a guy out of MIT who, I don't believe they're related, another man named Chen, who Greg Gong Chen, he's a mechanical engineering professor at MIT. He was accused of doing something that was not right, and he was later exonerated because there's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misunderstanding, no espionage going on. But this is the kind of thing that ends academic careers, ends research careers, and it doesn't curb espionage so much as it hurts individuals. And finally, the Matthew Olson, Justice Department official, said yesterday that by grouping cases under the Chinese initiative rubric, we helped give rise to a harmful perception that the department applies a lower standard to investigate and prosecute criminal conduct related to that country, or that we in some way were view people with racial, ethnic, or familial ties to China differently. He denied that happened, but he announced that the Justice Department was ending this Trump era effort because he understood tacitly that it unfairly targeted professors of Asian descent. He said that instead they'll introduce a broader strategy that would counter threats from hostile nations, which would extend beyond China to include countries like Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So they better highlight Russia with the yellow marker there. But at least they understood that it was hurting Asian Americans unfairly when they specifically targeted just China. So we have that coming down yesterday, and then we have this story saying that, hey, you know what? It's true. China's new China first policy is going to shut out the world, and you got to wonder about how I like to write about Eiling Gu, who was the American-born Chinese team member skiing for China. It's said she's going to come back and go to school at Stanford, although she's never said that she has given up her citizenship or given up her passport, because China does not allow dual citizenship. So either she cut a special deal, or maybe would China not allow her to leave the country? Would maybe China not allow her to speak freely? I mean, she thinks she can. She's 18. She thinks she can, but I don't know. Like I said, her mom, who is an MBA, and she's well versed in how to put together these deals between China and the West. Maybe she shielded her daughter a little bit. I don't know. That's always one of the questions I raise. The Olympic Games are over, but that question doesn't go away. But wouldn't it be interesting if she comes back to go to school in the fall or, late August, and she finds that she's not as free as she wants to be? She's so popular, you would think China wouldn't want to mess with her. Maybe she is too big to mess with, a version of too big to fail. But I don't know. Wouldn't it be interesting if we find Eiling Gu defecting back to the United States, willingly paying taxes to get back in because she finds her freedom is more valuable? We live in a different world now, but we probably could expect something like that. But this is, as I said, one of the things, the drumbeats by Russia over Ukraine have been going on for the last couple of weeks. And when Putin and Xi were at the games, the Winter Games, at the opening ceremony, that was a photo op. That was a symbol to the world. Here's the new world order. And now that the games have ended, and we see Putin flexing, not just flexing his muscles, but, peppering Ukraine with punches, aerial strikes, tanks. You got to wonder if this isn't the beginning of that new world order, and what will be the free world's response. I mean, we still ask it. I mean, the free world's response is, let's talk. The diplomacy first, right? I keep thinking about Martin Luther King. I keep thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh when he opposed the Vietnam War and left Vietnam to live in exile. How does a peace-loving, freedom-loving American deal with this crisis? It is not easy, because Putin has a certain logic to him, illogic, that says there is no diplomatic, no talking solution available at this time. We got to find a way that communicates in a way he understands. I don't know what that is. Joe Biden doesn't know what that is. But Joe Biden has to keep painting the picture for Americans to understand this is democracy and autocracy, or democracy versus autocracy. It's sovereignty versus subjugation. It's a battle over freedom, and freedom must prevail. I got my little flipper here. Hey, I'll be watching. I mean, I just keep the most effective things are the three stories that I've watched that have affected me the most. The quickness, seeing the tanks roll in, the speed of the tanks rolling in, how fast. I mean, I think I went to bed last night around, midnight, my time, knowing full well that when I woke up 6-7 hours later, there would be a full invasion, that the early stages of the invasion would grow. And I'd be in semi-shock. Semi-shock because, you just knew that it was going to happen. I'll just wake up in the morning and see how bad it is. And it's pretty bad because it wasn't just Donbass. It was all over Ukraine. In fact, there was that one report that I saw, CNN's Matthew Chance, at a military base witnessing the Russian army taking over. It wasn't Ukrainian in control. It was the Russian army 20 miles from Kyiv. So that was one. And then the other stories that just really hit hard is seeing normal rank and file Ukrainians race for the ATM to get money, race for the train station to get to Poland. Or in lieu of that, and these are not frontline Donbass cities. One was like to the far north. They were seeking shelter in a subway station with their babies, with all the food they could carry. They had a couple of things of crackers and some water, and they didn't know where to go. I mean, Americans have, we bitch and complain about things like, oh, I don't want to wear a mask. These people are undergoing real chaos in their lives, and they're seeking safety. You got to wonder, well, this woman was carrying a baby. She's got kids need to change the diapers. Adults need to go to the bathroom. What do people do? There's no place safe. It's like the other story I saw a week ago where they went into the Donbass region and people are just getting shelled all the time. And they say, well, where are we going to go? This is like a week and a half ago. Where are we going to go? We don't have money. Do we go, and who's going to help us? So this is going to be this is the inkling of a sad humanitarian situation that I don't know the way out. Here's the thing. Maybe Putin did it now because he knew that, this is going to help my buddy Trump because it's going to sink the midterms for the Democrats, and it's going to help. It's going to help. I'm being Putin now. It's going to help my buddy Trump. That's what it's got to be. There was no reason to do it now. No reason to do it now. And once again, we see just how far a reach that Putin has to impact our lives here. Think about that. Which is why, if you're watching the stuff on TV or seeing it in the news, just remember Putin's test is that you, as an American, will not find it within you to find your inner Ukrainian within. And really, you got to. This is Putin's test for any democracy-loving, freedom-loving American. So that's going to do it for our show today. Hey, look, thank you for tuning in. Emil Guillermo's Takeout. It's go to Aldef, the Aldef blog, aaldef.org/blog. See my writings. I kind of figured that something like this was going to happen after the Olympics. And in my latest piece, I talked about that. How the West trying to avoid going downhill fast on the slopes of war. Because you knew that Putin would maybe respect his fellow strongman, President Xi, by just waiting for the games to end. He did. Here it was, Thursday, boom. The invasion's on. Got to wonder, though, what's going through the minds of Kim Jong-un? What's going through the minds of, in India, of Modi, in the Philippines, of Duterte, although Duterte's not running. If he runs, he's going to have to be vice president. But he's still president. Maybe he has a strong man's taste after he sees what can be done. This is what we have to fear if there isn't a strong response from the free world. Anyway, check out my column, Aldef, aaldef.org/blog. My name is Emil Guillermo. Yeah. You can email me at emil@amok.com. This is our Takeout, Emil Guillermo's Takeout, the podcast. I do a podcast. It's different. But you can, wherever you podcast, you can listen to it. It's interesting. I'm going to update it soon. But this is the live stream where I ask, what does an Asian American think? Because they never ask us. They just say, they just assume they know. Oh, yeah, you're Asian. Yeah. Yeah, we got feelings. We've been imperialized. We've been colonized. We know what Ukraine is going through. I call this the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs and the ALL. So tune in, 2 p.m. Pacific, live right here, Monday through Friday. Regular listeners of the show know that this is the point of the show where if you're having any doubts, having any feelings of self-doubt, this is where you take this hand here, put it here, take this hand, put it there, and just give yourself a little squeeze. Yeah. Shame. Feel shame? Self-love. That's the answer. Insecure? Self-love. That's the answer. A little self-love to help the Ukrainians. Because they're going through a crisis. But as I say, the crisis belongs to the world. So, as I feel for me, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back again tomorrow. Till then, mahal